So this is a story our producer Alice found and thought we'd take a look at this because, look, the popularity of now professional women's hockey, there's no arguing, right? I mean, there are new teams being added. The crowds are bigger than ever before. What was a bit of a gamble not that many years ago has turned into a very successful sport. But it's women playing hockey, and women's needs are different, even in physical activities like these. And that's what's now being studied. This is actually quite interesting. Dr. Lawrence Spriet is a professor emeritus of human health science at Guelph University. He's also an exercise physiologist and lead researcher in the study that we're going to quickly talk about here. First of all, doctor, thank you for being here. And, I said, I think most people kind of consider that a blurred line, right? Men athletes, female athletes, we know these are the people at the top of their game. Why would their needs necessarily be any different? And I understand that women, obviously, muscle mass is different. What are you trying to find here?
Yeah, well, you make a good point. There are certainly some differences with respect to muscle mass, hemoglobin concentration, obviously female hormones. But by and large, when you have men or women exercising at high intensity, like you would do with hockey, a lot of the differences are quite small. But having said that, we have not had in the past a real good chance to study how much women sweat in professional ice hockey. And for some people that might come as a surprise, but these ladies are working extremely hard and are at the top of their game. And so we're trying to build a database on the amounts that people sweat, how salty their sweat are, whether they consume carbohydrate during exercise. And what we may find is that the differences are not a lot different than males, but of course you have to do the study in order to find that out. And maybe even the most important thing actually is that we already know that whether it's men or women, there's a tremendous variability between these athletes in terms of how much they sweat and how salty their sweat is. So the value of the testing is that each individual gets their own feedback. And that information as to how much they sweat, how much they should drink, should they take in extra salt, etc., is very valuable on an individual basis.
Now, I would have thought as you explain it that, guys sweat. We know that. I mean, just, guys playing a game together, not professional athletes, can work up a sweat. Usually the bigger the guy, the bigger the sweat. I mean, what does that tell us about in women's hockey where relatively, sizes are pretty much the same, I think, right, for the most part? What does that analysis tell you with respect to how much more they have to ingest or not?
Yeah, so the most important thing that we're doing is we're measuring how much they sweat during an intense practice or a game, and then are they putting in enough fluid to limit the loss in their body mass? Because many studies in many stop-and-go sports, men or women, have shown that if you lose about 1.5 or 2% of your body mass, so let's say you weigh 80 kilograms, that would be about 1.6 liters. Then there's the potential that your performance will go down. And a lot of times it's mentally you feel tired and lethargic and just don't have the energy to push as hard as you might. So that's the most important thing we're trying to check. And I suspect that in many cases we'll be simply telling the professional ladies that they're doing a good job. You're sweating this much, but you're putting this much back during the activity, and that's fine. Other people will get some advice to say, I know you knew you were a big sweater, but this is how much you sweat, and you're not putting enough back in.
As I hear you again describe this, I'm thinking to myself, we just always assumed some people sweat more than other people, just generally, not to do with exertion or anything else necessarily. Is that something you're finding?
Absolutely. I mean, we sometimes see, let's say, two players that play center. They weigh about the same. Their movements are tracked on the ice. They seem to cover the same amount of ice. And one person will sweat almost double what another person sweats. And this gets back to this whole genetic thing that we vary between each other. And, jokingly, we say you need to pick your parents carefully. So if you are a heavy sweater and a heavy salt sweater, you're going to have to work a little harder at staying hydrated than somebody that can get through the activity and sweats less.
To your point, by the way, and again, this is kind of surprising to me when you talked about the fact that obviously, if you're sweating that much, you're going to need to take in more fluid. It's not about the exertion then, because if everyone's exerting roughly the same amount of force or pressure, whatever we want to call it, the amount of liquid you take in will vary. And it's not about how much you exert yourself. It's simply about how much you sweat.
Yes, and that's where the genetic differences come in. That if you can show that on this day the exertion was the same between these two players, and usually, there's other factors like how cold was it in the rink, and the big factor in ice hockey, of course, is the equipment. So that even though if they're playing in an arena that's 10 degrees Celsius, underneath their equipment it's often 30, 35 degrees Celsius. So it's all about dissipation of heat. And some people have evolved to have to sweat more to dissipate the heat and limit how much your core temperature goes up. So, that's the beauty of it. Anytime you study humans about pretty much anything, exercise or anything else, you will see this wide variability in terms of people getting the job done. It's a bit similar to the variation in body size that we see in ice hockey, whether it's men or women. You have some very large people and you have some very small people, and yet they've all found a way to make it to the elite of their sport.
It's funny as I hear you say this, I think, we were told as kids, even our parents would tell us, if you're going to go out and, you're going to play football or whatever it happens to be, you're going to be outside, don't forget to drink. We knew this 3 generations ago.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when we first started doing this testing here in Canada, it was about 2005, only 20 years ago. A large proportion of the players, now in these days it was all males we were testing, were in fact letting themselves dehydrate. Oh. So I think growing up with the knowledge that you need to drink is not 2 generations ago. I think it's 1 generation ago, because when I grew up, and granted I'm an old person, nobody was allowed to drink, and now it's commonplace.
Oh,
so
right, yeah.
It's very good in that more and more players we see never get to the level of mild dehydration.
It's amazing what we learned, right? You're right. I would think back to then, they would tell you, no, don't drink. That's going to be bad for you to do, right? And now, of course, we know exactly the opposite.
Exactly.
And does it matter? I mean, we've also been told, and I know that Gatorade is tied into this, but we've often been told as well, plain old water does the trick. What are you finding? Is that good enough?
Well, I would say for many recreational people who are not exercising that long, that water is totally fine. But of course, sports drinks are designed for heavy exercisers, whether you're recreational and you're on your bike for 2 hours or you're running for an hour and a half. But I can tell you that all the levels of elite sports, including female ice hockey players, water is not enough, because one big reason is that our bodies are not just water, it's salt water, and we have electrolytes like sodium and chloride and potassium. And when we sweat, some of that comes out in the sweat. So the sports drinks are trying to do really 3 things. Get the fluid back, which I would argue is the most important. Secondly, we're trying to get a bit of the salt that we're losing in our sweat back into the body. And then thirdly, and maybe almost as important, is some of the sports drinks have low levels of sugar or carbohydrate. And carbohydrate is the fuel of choice for intense sports.
Right.
We call them stop-and-go sports, like ice hockey, where you're skating around the ice in an aerobic capacity, and then on top of that, you have to sprint, and carbohydrate is a fuel for that as well. So, the sports drinks are designed to meet those 3 needs.
It's interesting stuff. As I said, it's amazing what we continue to learn, when it comes to these sorts of things. Hey, listen, I very much appreciate the time today. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Very, very happy to do it, Aaron.
Thanks again. Dr. Lawrence Spriet, he's over at Guelph University. As I said, amazing what we're finding out, right? Although I do remember my parents saying, if you're going to be outside on a hot day and you're going to be running around, drink something. But he's right. Athletically, they were told, no, don't drink. That's bad for you. Turns out they were wrong.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
Or the free iHeartRadio app.